Welcome to the Internal Divinity Show with thought leader Lynda Lamp, uplifting and illuminating the divine in your life. In this confusing and clouded world, sometimes we lose sight of our blessings and the light we carry inside us. In the next hour, Lynda will show you the divinity that you have within you and give you the tools you need to let it shine forth. Become a force for good, strengthen your inner divinity, and help create the heaven on earth we all desire. The Internal Divinity Show starts now.
Welcome, everyone. Hello, I'm Lynda Lamp, and you're watching or listening to the Internal Divinity Show, uplifting and illuminating the divine in your life on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with us for the next hour and let me help you experience a new way to look at the life and the world. Each month on the second Tuesday, I'll share secrets of life and I'll answer your questions about how to see and experience more divinity in your life. This is a call-in show, and I'm here to support you. If you'd like to call in, the studio number is 1-800-930-2819. And my wonderful producer, Jonathan, will assist you. Be sure you give him your phone number or email so we have a way to get back to you, so I can send you a free digital copy of my book, Walking Through Your Walls, Loving Yourself and Everyone Else. And if you prefer a hard copy, I'm happy to send that as well if you're happy to pay the shipping. During this episode of Internal Divinity, we'll take up the question of being a force for good. So, sorry, I actually jumped ahead here. I'm so happy to be with you. Welcome to the 5th episode of Internal Divinity Show. And today's subject came from one of our viewers. And the question was, how do we become a force for good? And they went on to say, I've been donating to charities my entire life, but I'm beginning to feel that this isn't enough. So I truly appreciate the opportunity to take this question up and discuss it with you. Many people go about their days thinking that they're doing good things for the planet, their country, or their place of business, their family, or their church. Some of these people are motivated to think this because of their religious beliefs. Some of these people are politicians or lawmakers, and they're going about their days crafting legislation, as they were elected to do, to govern the rest of us. And there are tens and thousands of charities that take in billions of tax-free dollars annually. But are any of these people or businesses acting as a force for good? Or is there really something else happening? What about missionaries? The purpose of missionaries is to spread the word of Jesus, which is unconditional love. But do they go about it well? Are they forces of unconditional love? Would their efforts be better spent, perhaps helping people in their own communities? We all seem to yearn for a world of love and peace, but how do we create it? During this episode of Internal Divinity, we'll take up this question of being a force for good. Are you trying to be a force for good in your own world? How are you going about it? Call in and share your experience with us. I think one of the inherent challenges with this question is whether the person wanting to be a force for good has done their own healing yet. There are lots of folks in the world attempting to do what they might call force for good, when in fact what they're doing is projecting their own beliefs onto others, and often these beliefs are mistaken or incorrect. In fact, there was a very recent, like within the last couple of days, gun shooting by someone who believed he was being a force for good, when in fact he was acting out of hate. And then to complicate things, many charities, which are not-for-profits, meaning they pay no tax on their income, are so corrupt within themselves that they do little good overall in spite of the millions of dollars in donations they receive. So let's dig into this point for a moment, because as I was looking into this, I think the numbers are shocking, and you may not be aware of the deep level of corruption that exists within many charities. Many of us will gladly send money to our favorite charities, and we think we're doing good. Did you know that many charities are spending money on for-profit companies to solicit their donations? So they're taking donation money and they're not paying any taxes on it. And then they're turning around and they're paying it to for-profit companies to make solicitation phone calls with them to raise donations. It would appear we all need to ask ourselves, is our money being well spent when we give them to a charity? And do some research, perhaps, into each charity's practice. It's a fairly simple question we could all do. We could all ask each of the charities that we give money to, do you hire or pay companies to solicit your donations, other than just soliciting them themselves, right? And if the answer is yes, then that's probably not a charity you want to be giving money to. You're probably not doing good when you're giving money to a charity like that. And it also raises other questions about our intent and purpose overall. We need to be honest and admit that many of these charities are actually forces for capitalism more than anything else. And as an aside, our government is a force for capitalism, as well as with all the lobbying money and that representatives accept, and other perks and potential bribes even that they take. And folks may not realize that many elected officials spend more time fundraising for their political party and themselves, but for their political party than they do legislating, which is another little known fact. According to a Georgetown University report on congressional funding, this is a quote, incoming lawmakers are instructed to spend upwards of 4 hours a day raising money, which is time taken away from the legislative responsibilities of being an elected official. So our taxpayer dollars, which is what pays our representatives, is paying them to solicit donations, none of which the taxpayers benefit from. So back to charities for a minute. Back in 2013, there was some fantastic journalism done by Chris Hundley and Kendall Tagar from Tampa Bay News and the Center for Investigative Reporting. And I think it's fair to assume that things have only gotten worse in the last 10 years. CNN partnered with these journalists to showcase the results of their year-long investigation. And the year-long investigation was to identify America's worst charities. So you can read the entire article by searching for the words above the law, America's worst charities. You'll find it on CNN. And if you scroll to the bottom, it's already a long article, but if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you can read the full article, and that contains even more details. So I'm not going to go into all of the details or the findings, but I'm going to summarize by quoting a few paragraphs from the article, because I think it's really important to know what's going on. Using state and federal records, these journalists identified nearly 6,000 charities. And remember, this was 10 years ago, so there could be potentially even many more that have chosen to pay for for-profit companies to raise their donations. First off, the dishonesty often starts with their names. Many of these nonprofits adopt popular causes, and they mimic well-known charity names that fool donors. And then they rake in lots of money year after year under false pretenses. The nation's 50th worst charities have paid their solicitors nearly $1 billion over the 10 years, 2003 to 2013 that could have gone, $1 billion, that could have gone to charitable works. So we're going to get ready to take a break. You're listening to the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio with Lynda Lamp as your host. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll speak with our callers, and I'll pick up where we left off. Remember, if you'd like to call in, the studio number is 1-800-930-2819. If you prefer to text, you can text here in the studio where I am at 1-907-351-3003. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on Transformation Talk Radio with the Internal Divinity Show and your host, Lynda Lamp. Please feel free to call in at any time. The studio phone number here is 1-800-930-2819, or if you'd prefer to text, you can text at 1-907-351-3003. As we get into the next segment, if you can relate or you have a story to share or a question about anything I've said, please call in. Learning from one another is how we get through this thing we call life. My gift to you is a copy of my book, digital or hardbound. You pick. So we were talking about the 50 worst charities in America. And the article that is on this CNN site goes into a couple of the findings, and I just want to read a couple of them because they're really powerful. The 50 worst charities in America devote less than 4% of donations raised to direct cash aid. So some of the charities give even less. Over a decade, one diabetes charity raised nearly $14 million, and they gave about $10,000 in aid to patients. 6 of these 50 charities spent no cash at all on their cause. The Kids Wish Network, which is a look-alike to a different well-known charity, raises millions, but only spends 3 cents on the dollar actually helping children. Operators at many of the 50 worst charities have lied to donors about where their money goes. They've taken multiple salaries. They've secretly paid themselves consulting fees or arranged fundraising contracts with friends. One cancer charity paid a company owned by the charity's president's son nearly $18 million over 8 years for them to solicit funds. And a medical charity paid its biggest research grant to its own president's for-profit company. So when I read and I hear things like this, I have to ask myself, what are these people engaged in these organizations thinking? How can they sleep at night? How can people work for a charity that participates in these kinds of practices? How do they sleep? How do they sleep at night, knowing that they're basically engaged in perpetrating fraud? Because that's really what it is. The people who created the charities, the fake ones, basically, what are they doing? They're certainly not being a force for good. Now, I can only speak for myself, but I know others who think similarly. The only answer that we can come up with is that these folks are unaware of the impact of their actions, or they justify their behavior because they're afraid to quit their jobs. They think they need that job. And this is one of the secrets of life, right? The universe will always give us what we need when we need it, if we ask in a particular way. So I know if I were to find myself in a difficult situation such as this, working for a not-for-profit that was more concerned about raising donations than it was taking care of our clients or our intended cause, I'd have to quit. My personal integrity wouldn't allow me to take part in work like that, even if I needed a job. And this is what I'm saying. If I needed a job, then I would quit and a job would come along, a better job, because the universe will take care of us. The universe wants what's good for us. And I can tell you, if I forced myself to go to work every day doing something I fundamentally knew was wrong, I would become ill very quickly, regardless of what I might think about needing the job or having to have the job. My body would rebel. That kind of stress is too much. And our bodies are always reflections of what's happening to us internally. Our bodies are always communicating with us. And when we develop ailments, quite often it's our body telling us, trying to tell us about a stress that we're ignoring. I have a book called Messages from the Body. It's by a doctor, a psychologist, Michael J., or he might have been a psychiatrist. I'd have to go double check. Michael J. Lincoln. Messages from the Body is not a book you read. It's like a tomb. It's an encyclopedia. And it documents all kinds of physical ailments. And it goes into the psychological meaning behind the ailments. And it's his premise that when our body presents us with something, some problem, that there is an emotional and psychological meaning and cause behind those illnesses. And I think for the most part, he's accurate. A lot of people will ask me to look up in the book, you know, what does Michael J. Lincoln say about this or about that? And almost always when I read the descriptions, and a lot of times there are 2 or 3 choices that could potentially be behind whatever your physical ailment might be. But when I read through them, almost always the person says, yeah, I really can relate to that one. And so, and the roots of all of it ultimately end up in our childhood and dysfunctional families, dysfunctional relationships, and most of it stemming from our early childhood and growing up in toxic environments or difficult situations. And so if you're going to work and you know in your heart, your soul knows, your spirit knows that what you're doing is fundamentally not a force of good, don't be surprised if you have physical ailments. It is most likely your body trying to communicate to you that this is not how you should be spending your time. So before we go to the next break, I wanted to let you know that I have a live podcast with my co-host, Mary Adanya, that we broadcast on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Pacific. It's called Let's Become a Beloved Society, Conversations Illuminating Your Path to Wholeness. You can sign up on my YouTube channel to get notices. Lynda Lamp, Illuminating Wholeness is my YouTube channel. And remember, my first name is spelled with a Y, Lynda Lamp. You can also find Facebook and YouTube links to the broadcast on my website, lindalamp.com. We're live most Fridays at noon Pacific time. I'm Lynda Lamp, and you're watching or listening to the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion about how to be a force for good. If you want to call in, the number's 1-800-930-2819 or text to 1-907-351-3003. We're back on the Internal Divinity Show with Lynda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. I'm here talking with you today about how to be a force for good. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 1-800-930-2819 or text 1-907-351-3003. So before the break, we were talking about Michael J. Lincoln's book, Messages from the Body, and how when we're ill or have developed some problem with our body, it's quite often a psychological meaning that the body is trying to express to us. There is also, however, something else that can be going on. Our bodies represent multiple lives because there is no such thing as time. And so when we talk about past lives, they're really not past. They're happening concurrently. It's like if you took a spiral, right? And each of our lives is somewhere on this spiral, and then you just flattened it out. It's all happening at once. We're just somewhere else on the timeline, but the timeline's not linear. And so I've had, and I think I've shared in other shows, healings that have happened where we've done what I have just recently started to call a soul retrieval, because I've had a new way of seeing that kind of healing. So there can also be that going on. You can have something going on in another life that can be influencing your experience in this life. And suppose something that happens in this lifetime. Oh, here goes my service animal he should have done this during the break, but I guess he wants to get down. So we're going to let him down. Something happens in this lifetime that awakens a memory in a different lifetime. We can have these physical experiences. And if we can clear or heal ourselves with whatever the problem is in this lifetime, it will heal it in all lifetimes. So going back to like working in a place that makes you sick, whenever I have found myself in situations that I needed to leave, I know and I trust that the universe will take care of me and that something else will come along quickly. And I believe this with all my heart. If you choose to embrace your soul's purpose, to be hope, love, and grace in service to others, things will work out, and it will always be for the better. Neil Donald Walsh says, thank you, God, for already solving this problem for me. And I love this saying because it really ties in with my life as a play analogy. You've heard me say that there's a script for our play for creating heaven on earth. We each have a role that we agreed to play before we got here. We already decided how and when we're going to die, for example. We all did. The outcome of everything is already predetermined because A, there's no such thing as time, and we came here to create and experience heaven on earth. And it's already done. We just aren't in that part of the timeline yet. So think about it this way, because people don't like the idea that the script is already done. But you can't open a show on Broadway if you haven't finished the play. You write the script, you finish the script, you cast the script, you put up the scenery and the costumes, and then you open. And that's exactly what we did. We decided, we created with an intention of a plot. And the plot is to create and experience heaven on earth. The specifics of it, we didn't worry about. And that's what's happened here, right? We collectively decided to come into form and experience and further create heaven on earth. We came here to be loved and to be loved in physicality. What we didn't count on was everyone forgetting their soul purpose when they got here. And we've been trying to right this ship ever since, right? Lots and lots of people have come here before me with similar wisdom and similar messages. But free will continues to prevail. Perhaps with today's technology, we can reach more people and spread the word. And the Transformation Network is a fantastic place to do it. And there are lots of other spiritual networks out there as well. So the more people we can reach, and the more we can spread the word of our true purpose and meaning, the more quickly we can actually get back on stage in the theater with the play at hand. And perhaps more and more people will understand their divinity, their internal divinity, and begin acting from that place within them. So don't get me wrong, there's lots of people being spiritual and attempting to be forces of good right now. Many people are embracing the knowledge of our true oneness and are beginning to create peace in their lives by living mindfully aware and embracing of their soul purpose. Yet our job is to demonstrate our soul's purpose. And when we do, the play will unfold. Unlike an actual theatrical play on earth, the play we're in is collective. And as such, the plot of the play can only advance when we achieve some kind of critical mass. Now, there's some kind of a disagreement about what percentage is needed. Sometimes scientists will say only 10% is required. Some might even say less than that. And others would suggest we need 25% of us in the theater in order to advance the plot of creating heaven on earth by being hope, love, and grace through our service. So remember, we're free to express those qualities in whatever manner appeals us. That's where the free will comes in. And as long as we're fulfilling our soul purpose, we're advancing the play. We're doing what we came here to be, each and every one of us. However, if too many of us are out in the streets exerting our free will, being something other than love, hope, and grace, then the play of heaven on earth can't advance and we stall out. And I think that's about where we find ourselves today. America seems to have lost its moral center. Unfettered capitalism has consumed us at every level, from the groceries we eat, to the churches we attend, to our governmental bodies, our medical care, our charities, and beyond. Every aspect of American life is currently about how corporations can make money off of the backs of the people with no regard to our welfare. If there was ever a time in humanity when we as individuals needed to work to become forces of good, it's now. And the place to start is within ourselves. So how? How do we become a force for good? The number one thing everyone can do that will start a process is to volunteer. The value of volunteering can't be overstated. Do any of you remember watching Mr. Rogers? Fred Rogers spent his entire life, being a force for good. And he shared many great sayings during his long career. And this is perhaps one of his most famous quotes. He said, "When I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, 'Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping.'" And I want to clarify, his mother said this as a way to comfort him as a little boy, to let him know that as a small child, there was always someone ready to help. She's explaining that being in service, what being in service looks like. And she's telling him how to find those people who live being in service. Look for the helpers. Another one of his great quotes is, "If you could only sense how important you are to the lives of those you meet, how important you can be to the people you may never even dream of, there is something of yourself that you leave at every meeting with another person." And this is such a great quote because it ties in with the teaching that I love from Neil Donald Walsh that goes like this: your life isn't about you. It's about everyone you meet and how your life touches theirs. What matters is who you're being as you go about your day. In what way are you impacting those around you? Here's just a couple more quotes from Mr. Rogers. Love is at the root of everything, all learning, all parenting, all relationships. Love or the lack of it. There are three ways to ultimate success. The first way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. The third way is to be kind. I love that one. Before we take a break, I wanted to give our audience a way to connect with me outside of the show. As I've mentioned, you can text me personally at 1-907-351-3003, or you can send an email to questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com. This is Lynda Lamp and Transformation Talk Radio with the Internal Divinity Show. We're going to take a quick break and I'll be back shortly. Stay tuned. We're back on the Internal Divinity Show with Lynda Lamp on Transformation Talk Radio. If you'd like to join the conversation or ask a question, the studio number is 1-800-930-2819, or you can text me at 1-907-351-3003. Remember, you'll get a free copy of my book. If you'd like to contact me outside of the show, you can go to my website, lyndalamp.com. And remember, that's LYNDALAMP. You can send me a message or schedule a meeting, or if you visit my online store, you can purchase books, you can purchase some workshops, you can sign up for sponsor level if you like to support my work. Happy to have all of that. And I also do private sessions. So we were talking about Fred Rogers, who was a force for good his entire life, and had Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I have a couple more quotes of his I'd like to share. There are three ways to ultimate success. The first way is to, I read that one already, and I'm going to read it again because it's so great. The first way is to be kind. The second way is to be kind. And the third way is to be kind. When I say it's you I like, I'm talking about that part of you that knows that life is far more than anything you could ever hear or see or touch. That deep part of you that allows you to stand for those things without which mankind cannot survive. Love that conquers hate, peace that rises triumphant over war, and justice that proves more powerful than greed. Discovering the truth about ourselves is a lifetime's work, but it's worth the effort. The real strength has to do with helping others. The purpose of life is to listen to yourself, to your neighbor, to your world, to your God, and when the time comes, to respond in as helpful a way as you can find from within and without. And finally, deep within each of us is a spark of the divine, just waiting to be used to light up a dark place. One of my also favorites. So let's say you're ready to volunteer. Here's an example of the kinds of places that you can consider: family shelters, food pantries, libraries, senior centers, hospitals and nursing homes, animal shelters and rescue organizations, community arts groups, museums, theaters, youth organizations, after-school programs, sports groups, the Boys and Girls Club, national parks or conservation organizations, local service organizations like Rotary Club or Lions Club. What are you passionate about? Which of these things calls out to you? Do some of them make you uncomfortable? I would suggest picking something that tugs on your heartstrings. I would also suggest that if there's something that makes you uncomfortable, for you to look within for that cause. That's a sign when you're uncomfortable that there's something to be healed. Let's remember, it's what we believe that creates our perspective, and it's our perspective that creates our perception of things. So if something is making us uncomfortable, we can begin to understand it by looking at our beliefs and our perspective. Our uncomfortableness with the external world is a mirror of our internal discomfort. And I can think of two rather famous stories that support this particular notion. Dick Cheney was very much in favor of anti-LGBTQ legislation until he understood that his daughter fell into that category. And his perspective changed, right? His perspective changed because his beliefs changed and his perception of it changed. I believe it was also Nancy Reagan and drugs. I think there was something there where, she was very judgmental, and then something personal happened in her life, and it changed her. It woke her up to another way to look at things, to a different belief system, to a different perception. So oftentimes we can find ourselves in a rut, not just in our daily lives, but in our minds as well. So when we step out of our comfort zones and do something like volunteer to help others, it helps get out of our heads, if you will. And sometimes we're so caught up in our own lives and internal drama that it's difficult to think about anything else. And this is the time more than anything that volunteering can be the most powerful, because not only will you be helping others, but you'll be benefiting greatly yourself. Volunteering allows us to connect with others, to meet new people, to learn new skills, and to help others. It's good for your mind and your body, and it can even advance your career, depending on what it is. It can be fun, and it can be fulfilling. I've volunteered considerably in my life, and I've never had an unpleasant volunteering experience, even when some of the work was unpleasant. I'm thinking about like cleaning animal cages. That isn't the best thing, but the overall experience was fantastic. So this is because being in service to one another is the fundamental purpose of our being here. It's our sole purpose. And so the minute you line up with that, you've reconnected with divinity within you. And the universe is always listening. Everything around us is paying attention. This is because everything is imbued with consciousness. Now, this is the one thing that the majority of scientists have not figured out, right? But the fact of the matter is love wants us to succeed. Everything is love. Everything is divinity in form. And everything around us wants what's best for us and wants to help us. Divine love is why we're here, and it surrounds us at all times. And remember, we're here to be in service to one another. This is each of our purposes. So when we volunteer in service, the entire universe lights up as we step into the expression of our soul. Shifts of energy will occur, often instantly, but overall, you'll experience a shift in your life when you begin volunteering. And you'll know that you're being a force for good. If there's time, and we do have time, I'm going to share a couple of my volunteer experiences with you. So my most recent volunteer experience was actually a creation of my own. So this was about 5 years ago, I want to say. Yes, I think it was 2018. I live outside of a little tiny town, and I can't vote in the town because I live outside the city limits. But the town is important to many, many people, and that live outside the city as well as inside the city. And there was a lot of corruption, and the citizens were very ignorant about what was happening. And one of the council people at the time suggested that we needed to educate the citizens. And we got together and we had a meeting about how would we go about doing that. And I volunteered to start live streaming the shows, the council meetings on YouTube or Facebook rather. And so I started showing up at every council meeting and every special meeting and other meetings that they had, board meetings, and I live streamed every meeting that they had. And I put them up on Facebook, and then I would share them to the pages in the town that I live in that were appropriate. And it got people engaged, and it got them educated, and they started coming to meetings, and they started paying attention to what was happening. And it really transformed the town. And that was something we did on our own. And for the most part, I was the individual volunteer that did it. Whoa, that's not one of the studio phones. And I even was given an award the following year from the Chamber of Commerce. So you can do whatever moves you. If there's not something in that list that I mentioned, then think of your own way to volunteer, and you'll be a force for good. So if you have a situation you'd like assistance with, send me an email and I'm happy to help. I am here to help make your life better, right? We're all seeking peace. Peace is my mission, and peace and joy are our birthrights. So I've had a wonderful time with you today. I wish someone had called in, but I hope you found the information I shared interesting and helpful. And I'm Lynda Lamp, and I want to thank you all for tuning in to the Internal Divinity Show on Transformation Talk Radio. Please join me the second Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific. Next month, it'll be June 13th. We'll take another dive into the myth busting of life and the exploration of your internal divinity. I hope to see you then.
Thank you for joining in on the Internal Divinity Show. As we view our world through a new lens of understanding, we discover our inner light and power. When enough of us receive clarity about life, heaven will begin to show up. Come back next time on the second Tuesday of the month at 4 p.m. Pacific Time for more inspiration and instruction on unleashing your inner deity. To learn more or to contact Lynda, visit www.lindalamp.com. That's www.lindawithawlamp.com.